Jiho Kim pushed his worn baseball cap back and wiped the sweat from his forehead. The mining station's air recyclers were acting up again, making the repair bay feel like a sauna. He had been working on the same broken excavator for 6 hours straight, and his back ached from crawling under the massive machine. The smell of hot metal and engine oil filled his nose as he tightened another bolt with his wrench. The asteroid mining station floated alone in the dark space between stars. It was not a pretty place. Gray metal walls, flickering lights, and the constant hum of machinery made it feel more like a prison than a workplace. Jiho had been working here for 3 years, fixing everything that broke down. And on a mining station, everything broke down eventually. He crawled out from under the excavator and stood up, stretching his sore muscles. The machine was almost ready to go back to work. Just a few more adjustments and the miners could use it again to dig precious metals from the asteroid. Jiho took pride in his work, even if nobody else seemed to notice how hard he worked to keep things running. Suddenly, red lights began flashing all over the repair bay. The station's alarm system started screaming so loud that Jiho had to cover his ears. He had heard these alarms before during practice drills, but this was different. The sound was urgent and real. "All personnel to emergency stations," announced the voice of Commander Park over the speakers. "Unknown contact approaching the station." This is not a drill. Jiho's heart started beating faster. Unknown contact usually meant pirates or raiders looking to steal their hard-earned metals. He grabbed his toolkit and started heading toward the door, but something made him stop. Through the thick window of the repair bay, he could see something moving in the darkness of space. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. The thing was too big to be a normal spaceship. It looked more like a living creature than a machine. As it came closer to the station, Jiho could see that it was covered in what looked like scales that reflected the light from nearby stars. The creature was enormous, easily the size of 3 cargo ships put together. It had wings that seemed to bend and fold in ways that should not be possible, but the most shocking thing was its eyes. Even from this distance, Jiho could see 2 bright points of light that looked intelligent and ancient. The creature moved through space without making any sound that the station's sensors could pick up. It flew with a grace that no human-made ship could match. As it got closer, Jiho could see more details. The scales on its body changed colors like oil on water, shifting from deep blue to silver to gold. Its wings were not like bird wings or bat wings, but something completely different that seemed to push against space itself. Jiho pressed his face against the window, unable to believe what he was seeing. In his 3 years on the mining station, he had seen plenty of strange things. Weird rock formations, unusual metal deposits, even some old alien artifacts that nobody could explain. But he had never seen anything alive that was not human. The creature began to slow down as it approached the station's docking platform. Jiho could see that it was carrying something in its massive claws. Whatever it was carrying looked like another creature of the same type, but smaller and darker. The smaller creature was not moving at all. Commander Park's voice came over the speakers again, but this time he sounded confused and worried. "All security teams to docking bay 7. Unknown life form requesting permission to land. Medical team on standby." Jiho realized that the creature was heading straight for his repair bay. The docking platform outside his window was where it planned to land. He should have been running away like everyone else on the station, but something kept him frozen in place. The creature's eyes seemed to be looking directly at him through the window. As the creature settled onto the docking platform, Jiho could see how careful it was not to damage anything. Despite its massive size, it landed as gently as a feather. The platform, which was designed to hold heavy cargo ships, barely shook under its weight. Up close, Jiho could see that the smaller creature the large one was carrying was in very bad shape. Its scales were dull gray instead of the bright colors of the larger one. Strange lights flickered weakly under its skin like dying electrical circuits. Then something impossible happened. A voice spoke inside Jiho's head, not through his ears but directly into his mind. The voice was deep and ancient, carrying with it the weight of countless years. "Human mechanic," the voice said, somehow knowing exactly what Jiho was without being told. "I am called Taek. The one I carry is Luna, my mate. She is dying from something we cannot cure. I have traveled far to find you." Jiho stumbled backward from the window, his heart pounding. He was not going crazy. The creature was actually talking to him, somehow putting thoughts directly into his brain. He looked around the empty repair bay, wishing someone else was there to tell him this was really happening. You fix broken things, the voice continued. Your people understand machines in ways mine have forgotten. Luna needs fixing in a way only your kind might achieve. Through the window, Jiho could see the creature called Tyke looking at him with those ancient, intelligent eyes. The dying creature, Luna, was cradled gently in his arms like the most precious thing in the universe. Jiho had never seen love like that before, not even between humans. Security officers were running toward the docking platform with weapons drawn, but Tyke paid them no attention. His focus was entirely on Jiho, waiting for some kind of response. Jiho knew he should be afraid. Any normal person would be terrified of a giant alien creature speaking inside their head. But all he could think about was the dying creature in Tyke's arms. He had spent his whole life fixing broken things. Machines, tools, engines, anything that stopped working properly. But could he fix something that was alive? Something from another world that he did not understand at all? The voice in his head spoke again, softer this time. Will you try, human mechanic? Will you help us when your own people would fear to come near? Jiho looked at his hands, still dirty with grease and oil from working on the excavator. They were good hands, skilled at their work. But they were just human hands. How could they possibly help a dying alien creature? Still, something inside him answered before his brain could stop him. He placed his palm against the window and nodded at the creature called Tyke. He would try. Jiho walked slowly toward the airlock that led to the docking platform. His legs felt shaky and his heart was beating so fast he thought it might jump out of his chest. Behind him, he could hear the sound of running footsteps as security teams rushed through the station corridors. Commander Park was shouting orders over the radio, but Jiho could barely hear the words over the blood rushing in his ears. The voice in his head had gone quiet after he nodded at the creature through the window. Tyke was waiting patiently on the docking platform, still holding the dying Luna in his massive arms. Even through the thick metal walls of the station, Jiho could feel something like sadness coming from the alien creature. Jiho, what are you doing? The voice belonged to Hyun, his young assistant mechanic. The kid came running around the corner, his face red from excitement and fear. Commander Park says everyone needs to stay away from Docking Bay 7. There's some kind of alien monster out there. Jiho stopped and looked at Hyun. The boy was only 19 years old and had been working on the station for less than a year. He was a good kid, smart and eager to learn about fixing machines, but he had never seen anything like what was waiting outside. It's not a monster, Jiho said quietly. It's asking for help. Hyun's eyes went wide. Asking for help?
How do you know that?
Did it talk to you? Before Jiho could answer, the voice returned to his head. This time it was gentler, like someone trying not to scare a frightened animal. The young one with you has fear in his heart, Tyke said inside Jiho's mind. But you do not fear me. Why is this so? Jiho did not know how to answer that question, even to himself. Maybe it was because he had spent so many years working alone with broken machines. Machines could not hurt him the way people sometimes did. They were honest about what was wrong with them. If you fixed them right, they worked. If you did not, they stayed broken. It was simple and clean. I don't know, Jiho whispered, knowing somehow that Tyke could hear his thoughts even when he did not speak them out loud. The security team arrived at the airlock just as Jiho reached for the controls. Captain Minho, the head of station security, grabbed Jiho's arm and pulled him back. Are you crazy? Captain Minho shouted. We don't know what that thing wants. It could be dangerous. Through the thick window of the airlock, they could all see Tyke waiting outside. The creature was even more impressive up close. His scales were not just one color, but hundreds of different shades that moved and shifted like living light. His eyes were larger than a human head, and they seemed to hold knowledge older than anything on Earth. But it was Luna that made Jiho's heart ache. The smaller creature looked so sick and weak. Her scales had turned a dull gray color, and strange lights flickered under her skin like broken electrical wires. Whatever was wrong with her was getting worse by the minute. Look at her, Jiho said to Captain Minho. She's dying. They came here because they need our help. How do you know that? Captain Minho demanded. Did it communicate with you somehow? Before Jiho could answer, Tyke's voice filled the minds of everyone standing near the airlock. Captain Minho stumbled backward, grabbing his head. Hyun fell to his knees, his mouth hanging open in shock. Even the other security officers started backing away from the window. Do not fear me, humans of the metal nest. Take's mental voice was calm and patient. I am Tyek of the First Wing. guardian of the spiral arm. I come seeking aid for my mate Luna, who suffers from a sickness we cannot cure. Captain Minho pulled out his weapon and pointed it at the window, even though everyone knew the glass was too thick for bullets to break through. "What do you want from us?" he shouted. Images began flooding into their minds. Not words, but pictures and feelings that told a story more clearly than any book. Jiho saw glimpses of Tyke's world, a place where creatures like him lived among floating cities made of living crystal. He saw Luna when she was healthy, her scales bright with colors that had no names in human language. She and Tyke flying together through space between stars, their love for each other warm and pure. Then came darker images. A sickness that attacked Luna from the inside, making her weaker each day. Tyke traveling to world after world, seeking healers and doctors of his own kind. All of them tried to help, but none of them could stop the disease that was killing her. Finally, Jiho saw why Tyke had come to their mining station. Somehow, the alien creature had learned about human technology. He had studied their machines and tools from a distance. Human technology was different from anything his people used. Where Tyke's kind grew their technology like living things, humans built machines from metal and electricity. These machines worked by forcing energy and matter to behave in specific ways. "Your machines are crude but powerful," Tyke explained through the shared images. "They do not work with natural forces like ours do. They force changes to happen whether nature wants them or not. Luna's sickness cannot be cured by our methods because it adapts to our healing techniques. But your mechanical approach might be different enough to surprise the disease." Jiho understood what Tyke was asking, and it terrified him. The alien wanted him to try to save Luna's life using human technology and human thinking. But Jiho was just a mechanic who fixed mining equipment. He was not a doctor or a scientist. He knew how to repair broken engines and replace worn-out parts, but how could any of that help a dying alien creature? "I don't know anything about medicine," Jiho said out loud, hoping Tyke could understand him. "I just fix machines." "Sometimes fixing and healing are the same thing," Tyke replied gently. "Your people think about problems in ways mine have forgotten. We have become too advanced, too careful. We try to work with the natural order. But sometimes the natural order is wrong and must be forced to change." Medical Officer Soman came running down the corridor with a team of doctors and scientists. She was a smart woman who had studied alien biology at the university before coming to work on the mining station. When she saw Tyke through the window, she stopped so suddenly that the people behind her almost knocked her down. "Impossible," she whispered. "The size, the complexity. This creature must have a nervous system more advanced than anything we've ever discovered." Tyke turned his enormous head to look at Soman through the window. "Your healer sees truth," he said into all their minds. "We are old, perhaps too old. We have forgotten how to fight when nature itself becomes the enemy. But you humans remember. You have kept the knowledge of forcing change when change does not want to come." Soman stepped closer to the window, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. "What exactly is wrong with your mate?" she asked. The images that flooded their minds this time were more detailed and frightening. The disease attacking Luna was not like any sickness humans had ever seen. It attacked the very energy that held her consciousness together. Her scales, which were actually tiny biological computers, were being corrupted one by one. Soon there would be nothing left of her mind or her spirit. "Our healers say the sickness is impossible to cure," Tyke explained. "It learns from every treatment we try and becomes stronger. But your machines do not learn or adapt. They simply do what they are told to do, no matter how impossible it seems." Jiho looked at Luna's weakening form and made a decision that would change everything. He turned to Captain Minho and held out his hand. "Give me the keys to the airlock," he said firmly. "I'm going to help them." Jiho stepped through the airlock onto the docking platform, his environmental suit making soft hissing sounds with each breath. The platform was usually busy with cargo ships and mining equipment, but now it felt empty except for the massive presence of Tyke. Up close, the alien creature was even more amazing than Jiho had imagined. Tyke's scales were not just beautiful to look at. As Jiho walked closer, he could see tiny patterns of light moving under each scale, like circuit boards made of living tissue. The patterns were so complex that they hurt his eyes to watch for too long. Each scale seemed to be doing thousands of calculations every second. "Welcome, human mechanic." Tyke's voice spoke directly into Jiho's mind. "I am grateful that you chose to come despite your fear." Jiho looked up at Tyke's enormous head. The creature's eyes were like looking into deep space full of stars and ancient wisdom. "I'm not really afraid," Jiho said, surprised to find that it was true. "I just don't understand how I can help you." Tyke carefully lowered his head until he was closer to Jiho's level. When he spoke again, his mental voice was filled with sadness. "Look upon Luna and see what this plague has done to her." Jiho walked over to where Luna lay in Tyke's massive arms. She was still incredibly beautiful, but it was the beauty of something that was fading away. Her scales, which should have been bright with moving patterns of light, were now dark and lifeless. Only a few weak sparks flickered under her skin, and they were getting dimmer by the hour. "What exactly is this plague?" Jiho asked. "How does it work?" Instead of words, Tyke shared images directly into Jiho's mind. Jiho saw a story that began millions of years ago, when a civilization of beings made of pure energy ruled a distant galaxy. These energy beings were cruel and selfish, caring only about their own power. When other species tried to fight back against them, the energy beings created a terrible weapon. The weapon was not a bomb or a gun. It was a disease designed to destroy any creature that used advanced biological technology. The disease would learn how each species' technology worked, then corrupt it from the inside. It was meant to make sure that no other species could ever become advanced enough to challenge the energy beings again. But the energy beings made a mistake. Their weapon was too good at what it did. Eventually, it found its way back to them and destroyed their entire civilization. For millions of years, the plague drifted through space, dormant and waiting. Sometimes it would find a new species to infect, but most space-traveling races were smart enough to stay away from the areas where it had been detected. "How did Luna get infected?" Jiho asked. More images flowed into his mind. Luna and Tyke had been exploring an ancient ruin on a dead planet. The ruin was beautiful, filled with crystals that sang with harmonious music. Luna had touched one of the crystals, not knowing that it contained traces of the ancient plague. The disease had been waiting in the crystal for thousands of years, and Luna's advanced biology made her the perfect host. At first, we thought it was just tiredness from our long journey, Tyke explained. But within days, Luna began to weaken. The plague attacked her scales first, corrupting the biological computers that control her body's functions. Then it spread to her consciousness centers, the parts of her mind that make her who she is. Jiho studied Luna's darkened scales more carefully. Even with his limited knowledge of alien biology, he could see that something was very wrong. The scales should have been processing information and energy, but instead they looked dead and empty. "Have your people tried to cure this before?" Jiho asked. "Many times," Tyke replied sadly. "We have the finest healers in the galaxy. They tried growing new scales to replace the infected ones, but the plague simply spread to the new tissue. They tried using energy treatments to burn out the infection, but the plague adapted and became resistant. They even tried putting Luna into deep sleep to slow the disease, but it continued to spread even while she was unconscious." Jiho began to understand why Tyke had come to seek help from humans. Every cure that Tyke's people had tried was based on their advanced biological technology. But the plague had been specifically designed to defeat that kind of technology. It could learn and adapt to any biological treatment almost instantly. "Your healers all think the same way," Jiho said slowly. "They try to work with Luna's natural biology, right? They try to help her body heal itself." "That is the proper way," Tyke agreed. "We do not force healing. We guide it and help it along the natural paths." But this plague was designed to expect that kind of treatment, Jiho realized. It knows how to fight against biological healing methods because that's what it was created to do. Tyke's eyes brightened with understanding. Yes, the plague learns from each treatment and becomes stronger. But human technology does not try to work with natural forces. You force matter and energy to do what you want, whether it is natural or not. Jiho thought about all the machines he had repaired over the years. When an engine broke down, he did not try to convince it to heal itself. He found the broken part and replaced it with a new one. When a computer crashed, he did not try to work with the corrupted data. He wiped it clean and installed fresh software. "Your mechanical thinking might confuse the plague," Tyke continued. "It has never encountered healing methods that simply force change to happen, instead of working with natural processes." Jiho walked around Luna's motionless form, studying her from different angles. Her breathing was very shallow, and the lights under her scales were fading fast. Whatever he was going to do, it had to be done quickly. I need to understand exactly how the plague works, Jiho said. Can you show me what it's doing to her right now? Tyke shared more detailed images with Jiho. The plague was like a computer virus, but one that attacked living tissue instead of electronic circuits. It would study how Luna's scales processed information, then create false signals that corrupted the process. Each scale that became infected would then spread the corruption to neighboring scales. The most frightening part was that the plague was intelligent. It could predict what treatments would be tried and prepare defenses against them. It had already adapted to counter every healing method that Tyke's people knew. But it doesn't know anything about human methods, Jiho said thoughtfully. It wouldn't know how to defend against something it has never seen before. That is our hope, Tyke agreed. But I must warn you, human mechanic. If you try to help Luna and fail, the plague might spread to your people. Your biological systems are very different from ours, but the plague is capable of adapting to new hosts. Jiho looked at Luna's fading form and then back at Tyke's ancient, hopeful eyes. The risk was enormous. If he failed, he might bring a deadly plague to the entire human race. But if he did nothing, Luna would certainly die and Tyke would be left alone with his grief. I need to study your technology, Jiho said finally. I need to understand how Luna's body works before I can figure out how to fix it. Can you teach me? Tyke's mental voice filled with gratitude and relief. I will share everything I know with you, human mechanic. Together, perhaps we can find a way to save her that the plague has never seen before. As Jiho prepared to learn about technology more advanced than anything humans had ever imagined, he realized that this was the most important repair job of his life, and unlike fixing a broken machine, if he failed this time, someone he was beginning to care about would die. Jiho had not slept in 3 days. His workshop looked like a tornado had hit it. Pieces of dismantled equipment covered every surface, and thick cables snaked across the floor connecting devices that were never meant to work together. Empty coffee cups and half-eaten food containers were scattered among the electronic components like islands in a sea of organized chaos. Hyun stood in the doorway, afraid to step inside. Jiho, what is all this? He asked, staring at the strange collection of machinery that his mentor had assembled. It's Luna's only chance, Jiho replied, without looking up from the device he was building. His hands were steady despite his exhaustion, carefully connecting wires that carried more electrical power than most people ever worked with. Hand me that quantum processor from the mining drill. Hyun picked up the heavy component, struggling with its weight. Are you sure about this? Commander Park is asking questions about why you took apart half the station's equipment. Jiho finally looked up at his assistant. The young man's face was full of worry, and Jiho could not blame him. What he was attempting seemed impossible even to himself. I know it looks crazy, Jiho said, but this might actually work. The plan that Jiho had developed was unlike anything that had ever been tried before. Instead of fighting the plague directly, he would create what he called a quantum isolation chamber. The device would surround Luna's consciousness with a field of pure nothingness, a space where the plague's exotic properties could not function. The theory was simple, but building the device was incredibly difficult. Jiho had to combine technology from the station's mining equipment, life support systems, and even the defensive shields. Most of the components were not designed to work together, and forcing them to cooperate required creativity and skill that pushed Jiho to his limits. Explain it to me again, Hyun said, as he helped Jiho lift another piece of equipment into place. How is this supposed to save her? Jiho wiped sweat from his forehead and pointed to a diagram he had drawn on the workshop wall. Luna's body works by processing quantum information through her scales. The plague corrupts that information like a computer virus, but if I can create a space where quantum information cannot exist at all, the plague will have nothing to work with. But won't that hurt Luna too? Hyun asked. That's the risky part, Jiho admitted. Luna's consciousness will be isolated from her body for a while. But Tyke says her people can survive that for short periods. The hope is that without quantum information to corrupt, Luna's natural healing will be able to fight off the plague. Medical Officer Soman entered the workshop carrying a tablet full of data. She had been working around the clock to understand Luna's biology, using every scanner and sensor the station had available.
Jiho, I've got the latest readings on Luna's condition.
She's getting worse faster now. Jiho looked at the numbers on Soman's tablet and felt his heart sink. Luna's life signs were dropping rapidly. The lights under her scales were almost completely dark now, and Tyke had told him that once they went out entirely, Luna would be beyond saving. How much time do we have? Jiho asked. Maybe 12 hours, Somin replied sadly. After that, the damage to her consciousness centers will be permanent. Jiho looked at his half-finished device and calculated how much work was left to do. Even working without sleep, he was not sure he could complete it in time. But he had to try. I need more power, Jiho said. This device is going to draw more electricity than the workshop can provide. Eon frowned. Where are we going to get that much power? From the main reactor, Jiho replied. I need you to help me run cables directly from the station's power core. That's against regulations, Eon protested. Commander Park will never allow it. Then we don't tell him, Jiho said firmly. Luna is dying while we follow rules. Working together, Jiho and Hyon spent the next 6 hours running power cables through the station's maintenance tunnels. They had to be careful not to overload the electrical systems, which meant carefully calculating how much power each component needed. Jiho's device required more electricity than some small cities used, but the station's fusion reactor could handle it if they were smart about the distribution. While they worked on the power systems, Somin continued monitoring Luna's condition and studying the data that Tyke shared with her. The alien's biological systems were more complex than anything in human medical textbooks, but she was beginning to understand the basic principles. Jiho, Somin called out as he emerged from a maintenance tunnel covered in dust and grease. I think I understand something important about how this plague works. Jiho hurried over to where Somin was standing next to her portable medical equipment. On her screen was a 3-dimensional image of one of Luna's infected scales magnified thousands of times. Look at this, Somin said, pointing to dark spots on the image. The plague doesn't just corrupt the quantum information randomly. It creates specific patterns of corruption that spread in predictable ways. What does that mean? Jiho asked. It means the plague is not as smart as we thought, Somin explained excitedly. It follows rules like a complex computer program. If we can disrupt those rules, we might be able to confuse it long enough for Luna's body to recover. Jiho studied the patterns on Somin's screen. He was not a biologist, but he understood systems and how they could fail. You're right, he said slowly. This plague is like a very sophisticated virus, but it's still just following programming. And programs can be crashed if you feed them the wrong input. This discovery changed how Jiho thought about his quantum isolation chamber. Instead of just creating a space where the plague could not function, he could make the space actively hostile to the plague's programming. By introducing random quantum fluctuations into the isolation field, he could force the plague to encounter situations it was not designed to handle. This is brilliant, Jiho said, already thinking about how to modify his device. The plague expects to work with organized biological systems. But if I can create chaos inside the isolation field, the plague won't know what to do. Jiho worked frantically to modify his device, adding components that would generate random quantum noise. It was dangerous work because the forces he was dealing with could easily destroy the entire station if something went wrong. But Luna was running out of time, and desperate situations called for desperate measures. As he made the final connections, Jiho realized that what he was building had never been attempted by any species in the galaxy. Human engineering was different from what advanced aliens used, but that difference might be exactly what was needed. While other species tried to work in harmony with natural forces, humans had learned to bend those forces to their will through pure mechanical determination. It's ready, Jiho announced as he tightened the last bolt on his device. The machine hummed with barely contained energy, its jury-rigged components working together in ways their designers never intended. Tyke's mental voice reached him from the docking platform. Luna grows weaker, human mechanic. Can your device save her? Jiho looked at his creation, a testament to human stubbornness and ingenuity. It was ugly, dangerous, and completely untested, but it was also their only hope. I don't know, Jiho replied honestly, but we're about to find out. The entire mining station felt different as Jiho activated his quantum isolation device. The lights dimmed throughout the corridors as massive amounts of power flowed into his jury-rigged machine. Deep in the station's core, the fusion reactor worked harder than it ever had before, feeding energy into a device that should not have been possible to build. Luna lay in the center of the isolation chamber, her massive form barely fitting inside the ring of machinery that Jiho had constructed around her. Tyke crouched beside the chamber, one of his enormous claws resting gently on Luna's darkened scales. His ancient eyes were filled with hope and terror as he watched the human mechanic prepare to attempt the impossible. All systems are running within acceptable limits, Soman reported from her monitoring station. She had connected every scanner and sensor the medical bay possessed to track Luna's vital signs during the treatment. Her heart rate is very slow, but that seems to be normal for her species during healing sleep. Jiho stood at the control panel he had built from spare computer parts and mining equipment displays. Red warning lights flashed all around him as the various systems operated far beyond their designed specifications. The quantum field generators were running so hot that the air around them shimmered like a desert mirage. Beginning quantum isolation in 3, 2, 1, Jiho announced and pressed the activation switch. The effect was immediate and startling. The space around Luna seemed to bend and twist as reality itself was forced into an unnatural state. Inside the isolation field, the laws of physics worked differently than anywhere else in the universe. Quantum information could not exist there, which meant the plague had nothing to feed on or corrupt. For the first hour, nothing seemed to happen. Luna remained motionless, her breathing so shallow that it was barely visible. The lights under her scales continued to fade, and Jiho began to worry that his device was not working correctly. Maybe the plague was too strong. Or maybe his understanding of quantum mechanics was too limited to create an effective isolation field. Her biological readings are stable, Soman reported, trying to sound encouraging. The isolation field is not hurting her, at least. Tyke's mental voice was tight with worry. In our healing traditions, we would see signs of improvement within the first hour. Are you certain your device is functioning properly? Jiho checked his readings again, comparing them to the calculations he had worked out over the past 3 days. Everything looked correct, but this was the first time anyone had ever tried to cure a quantum plague using human technology. There was no instruction manual for what he was attempting. The field is stable, Jiho replied, but this plague has been adapting and growing stronger for months. It might take longer to weaken it than we hoped. As the second hour passed, Jiho noticed something strange on his monitoring equipment. The quantum noise generators that he had added to the isolation field were creating patterns that seemed almost random, but not quite. It was as if something inside the field was trying to organize the chaos but could not quite succeed. Soman, are you seeing this? Jiho called out, pointing to the readings on his display. The medical officer hurried over to look at Jiho's screens. Her eyes widened as she studied the data. Those patterns look like the plague is trying to adapt to the isolation field, but it cannot figure out how to work in a space with no quantum information. Exactly, Jiho said excitedly. The plague is like a computer program that has been given impossible instructions. It is trying to run, but it cannot find the data it needs to function. During the third hour, something wonderful began to happen. A single scale near Luna's heart began to glow with faint blue light. It was so dim that they almost missed it. But Soman's sensitive equipment detected the change immediately. Look, she whispered, pointing at Luna's chest. One of her scales is beginning to recover. Tyke's massive head moved closer to Luna, his eyes focusing on the tiny point of light that had appeared on his mate's body. His mental voice was filled with wonder and disbelief. It is working. Your crude human device is actually working. The single glowing scale was like a candle in the darkness, but it was proof that Jiho's plan was succeeding. Inside the quantum isolation field, the plague could not function properly. Without the plague constantly corrupting her biological systems, Luna's natural healing abilities were finally able to begin repairing the damage. Over the next several hours, more scales began to glow. The process was slow and sometimes seemed to stop completely, but each hour brought new signs of recovery. The patterns of light under Luna's skin began to move again, processing information and energy the way they were meant to. Jiho stayed at his control station, constantly adjusting the isolation field to maintain the delicate balance between protecting Luna and allowing her body to heal. It was like performing surgery with tools made from spare parts, requiring skill and intuition more than scientific knowledge. Her heart rate is increasing, Soman reported during the 5th hour, and her brain activity is showing signs of normal sleep patterns instead of the deep unconsciousness she has been in. Tyke never moved from Luna's side, sharing his own life energy with her to help support her weakened systems. The love between the two alien creatures was so obvious that even the human observers could feel it. Jiho found himself thinking about what it would be like to care about someone that much. By the 6th hour, Luna's breathing had become deeper and more regular. The lights under her scales were still dim, but they were growing brighter steadily. Most importantly, the random quantum patterns that showed the plague's confusion were becoming weaker. The plague is losing its hold on her, Jiho observed, watching the data streams on his monitors. It cannot adapt to an environment where quantum information does not exist in any organized form. During the 7th hour, Luna's eyes opened for the first time in days. They were cloudy and unfocused at first, but gradually they began to show awareness of her surroundings. When she saw Tyke's worried face looking down at her, the faintest ghost of a smile seemed to cross her features. Luna. Tyke's mental voice was soft with relief and joy. Can you hear me, my beloved? Luna's response was too weak for the humans to detect, but Tyke's scales brightened with happiness. She was communicating with him again, probably for the first time since the plague had grown strong enough to damage her consciousness centers. How much longer do we need to keep her in the isolation field? Someone asked. Jiho studied his readings carefully. The plague signature was still present in Luna's system, but it was growing weaker by the hour. I think we need at least 12 more hours to make sure the plague is completely defeated, he said. If we stop the treatment too early, it might come back stronger than before. As they settled in for a long night of monitoring Luna's recovery, Jiho realized that he had accomplished something that the most advanced medical minds in the galaxy had been unable to do. Using nothing but human determination and mechanical thinking, he had found a way to defeat a plague that had been designed to be incurable. But more than that, he had saved someone that Tyke loved more than life itself, and somehow that felt like the most important repair job he had ever completed. 3 weeks had passed since Jiho shut down the quantum isolation device. Luna stood on the docking platform beside Tyke, her scales once again blazing with colors that shifted like living rainbows. The patterns of light under her skin moved in complex dances, showing that her biological systems were working perfectly once more. She was not just healed but stronger than she had been before the plague attacked her. Jiho watched from the observation window as Luna tested her wings for the first time since her recovery. Even folded against her body, they were massive structures that seemed to bend space around them. When she spread them wide, the sight took Jiho's breath away. Each wing was covered in scales that caught and reflected light from the nearby stars, creating patterns too beautiful for human eyes to fully appreciate. She is magnificent, Hyun said quietly, standing beside his mentor. I cannot believe we actually saved her. We did not save her, Jiho replied. We just gave her body the chance to save itself. Over the past 3 weeks, Jiho had learned more about the universe than he had ever imagined possible. Tyke and Luna had shared knowledge freely, teaching him about technologies that could change human civilization forever. They had shown him star maps revealing the locations of abandoned worlds rich with resources, and explained scientific principles that human researchers would not discover for centuries. But the most valuable thing they had shared was friendship. Despite the vast differences between their species, Jiho had found that Tyke and Luna were people he could understand and respect. They were ancient beings with wisdom beyond measure, but they also knew how to laugh and tell jokes. They appreciated the simple pleasure of watching stars together, and they understood the satisfaction that came from fixing something that was broken. The time has come for us to leave. Tyke's mental voice reached everyone on the station at once. Luna is fully healed, and we have other duties that call us back to the far reaches of space. Commander Park had given up trying to understand what was happening on his station. The presence of 2 alien dragons had disrupted every regulation and procedure he knew, but he could not argue with the results. Word of Luna's miraculous recovery was already spreading through human space, bringing scientists and diplomats from Earth to study what had happened. Before we go, Luna's mental voice was like music made of light. We wish to offer gifts to those who saved my life. Jiho walked out to the docking platform one last time, wearing his environmental suit. Luna turned her enormous head toward him, and for a moment they looked directly into each other's eyes. Jiho saw gratitude there, but also something deeper. He saw recognition of the bond that had formed between them during her healing. Human mechanic, Luna said gently. You gave me back my life when no one else in the galaxy could help me. How can such a debt ever be repaid? You don't owe me anything, Jiho replied. I just did what anyone would do when they saw someone who needed help. Tyke's mental laughter filled Jiho's mind. That is exactly why your species is so remarkable. You believe that helping others is normal and expected, but most civilizations lose that instinct as they become more advanced. Luna moved closer to Jiho, lowering her head until she was at his level. We have decided to share something with your people that we have never given to any other species. We are going to teach you how to heal the way we do, combining your mechanical methods with our biological knowledge. Images flooded into Jiho's mind, showing him medical techniques that seemed like magic. He saw how dragon healers could regrow damaged organs by singing specific frequencies, how they could cure diseases by adjusting the quantum patterns in living cells, and how they could extend life by harmonizing the energy flows in a patient's body. This knowledge will revolutionize human medicine, Soman whispered, tears streaming down her face as she received the same images. We will be able to cure diseases that we thought were impossible to treat. But Luna was not finished with her gifts. She shared more images with Jiho, showing him technologies that could clean polluted worlds, machines that could create food from simple elements, and energy sources that could power entire civilizations without damaging their environments. Why are you giving us all this? Jiho asked, overwhelmed by the generosity of what was being offered. Because you proved that wisdom and compassion are not related to how advanced a species becomes. Tyke replied, your people are young and your technology is simple, but you understand something that many older civilizations have forgotten. You understand that the most important thing is to help those who are suffering. Commander Park stepped forward, representing the human government in this historic moment. On behalf of all humanity, I accept these gifts with gratitude and humility. We promise to use this knowledge wisely and to share it with all people. Luna's scales brightened with pleasure. We know you will. But remember, the greatest gift you have given us cannot be repaid with technology or knowledge. You gave us hope when we had lost it, and you showed us that intelligence and kindness can exist together. As Tyke and Luna prepared to leave the mining station, Jiho realized that his life would never be the same. He was still a mechanic who fixed broken things, but now he understood that sometimes the most important repairs were not to machines, but to the connections between living beings. Will we see you again? Hyun asked, speaking for everyone who had watched this incredible story unfold. The galaxy is vast, but the paths of friends have a way of crossing again. Luna replied mysteriously, and now that our species know each other exist, there will be many opportunities for cooperation and friendship. Tyke spread his massive wings, preparing for the journey back to their home among the stars. Take care of each other, humans of the metal nest. Remember that the universe is full of wonders, but the greatest wonder is the kindness that one thinking being can show to another. Luna took her place beside Tyke, her own wings catching the light from the station's external lamps. Thank you, Jiho Kim, human mechanic. You will always be remembered among our people as the one who faced the impossible and made it possible. With a grace that defied physics, the two dragons lifted off from the docking platform and began their flight back into deep space. Jiho watched until they disappeared among the stars, leaving behind only the memory of their friendship and the knowledge that would change humanity forever. As he walked back into the station, Jiho found himself smiling. He had started this adventure as a simple mechanic working on a remote mining station, but he was ending it as someone who had saved a life, made friends with beings from another world, and helped establish the foundation for a new age of cooperation between species. The universe, he realized, had room for mechanics and dragons alike, and sometimes the most important job was not fixing what was broken, but building connections that had never existed before.